Okay, so let's go into the next part of this, moving the player. So getting this thing that we've set up to actually do something with the player. So what the tutorial is explaining is that your player prefab actually came, so this file that you downloaded, it already came with a rigid body on it. Home Ec described this to me. I went through several hours, and this is one of those things, like, he explained it to me where I actually understood. Basically, what a rigid body is, if you kind of zoom in here, the rigid body on this is the physics engine. When you put a rigid body and a box collider on it, this box collider here, you can actually edit that. You see that you can change the size of that. I'm not going to mess with that because I don't need to. But this came with a rigid body. This is your physics engine, that when it goes up or over, if there's not standing on anything, it will fall from that. So that is your gravity kind of thing. It's called a rigid body because you can push it around, you can move it, but you can't squish it further than it actually is. So it's going to stay rigid forever. So I say, Home Ec, thank you for explaining that to me in your video. That was really helpful. So what we're going to do is, since we already have a rigid body on it, it already has an X component, an X-axis component for horizontal speed, and a Y component for a vertical speed. So right at the moment, it's not moving at all. So Y is 0, X is 0. If it was moving up, it would be positive Y. If it was moving down, it'd be negative Y. But since it's not doing that, we're going to move forward. So what this tutorial is going to tell you is that what we're trying to do is we just want the X. We don't want the Y. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move over right over here. So kind of scoot that over just a little bit. And we're going to get the variable movement. So we're going to get variable, and it is a graph variable. Remember, this is a variable that was created right over here just inside this graph. We're going to get that, and since that's the only one, we're going to get that graph movement. And we're going to create a vector 2. Create vector 2, so it's going to come up vector. So create vector 2. This is an XY. Sometimes it does this, guys, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just Bolt. When you click on it, it goes away and you have to do it again. Create vector 2. So we're going to hit enter this time. Come on, dude. Hit enter, and it's going to come out. So basically what we're saying is we want the X vector, right? And we're going to do something with it. We're going to make it move. But we don't want the Y. Actually, we get the Y. Get Y for the vector 2. Sorry, we get Y for the vector 2, and it is the velocity, which is also another word for speed. Get velocity on rigid body 2D. Not rigid body 2D. And so we're going to get the Y. Oops. And this is what we're going to do with it. We're going to get the X. X is the movement. And then we don't really need the Y, so whatever the Y is, that's fine. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put it into set velocity. Velocity 2D. Rigid body 2D set velocity. So what this is doing is it's saying whatever the Y is, good. Make it that. But make the movement the X. So if you come back here, we stored all this information in the X, that when we press left or right or A or D on your keyboard, or whatever input you have, that we're going to multiply that times the speed. So if you move left, it's -1. We're going to multiply that times 5, which is your speed, remember? Because over here you got your speed. So -5. -1 times 5 is -5. So that is now your movement. If it's positive, then it's positive, right? So +1 times 5 is 5. So that's your movement. And when we take our movement, so X is our movement. X is the movement. Y is whatever you were before on your rigid body. So get that velocity. And now we're going to set the velocity to that. So what we should see now is that our player should actually move if we have that updated. So there's one more thing that we need to do before we do that. If you remember on that, goodness, oops, sorry, that was my screen. I've got multiple monitors up here, and so it's kind of frustrating to get that to work the way that I want it to. So we zoom out here. So the update is going to set that to the velocity. So what we're doing is we're kind of rearranging our graph here. Fix that real quick to clean this up. Looking on two screens. Okay, so what this is doing, let me break that real quick. You can right click to break that, by the way. We're gonna move this down, move these down, and that is gonna go up. Okay, so we're gonna get the variable movement. We're going to put it into the X, and that's going to set the velocity. And now, when we touch this on the keyboard, that it's going to go into that, and it's actually going to make it move. So now what we should see when we go into our game is it should actually move, right? So they have a little tip there, but I will get into that in just a second. So let's see if this works. Cross our fingers. All right, so when I press left, it goes left. When I push right, it goes right. Now, if you notice, it doesn't animate anything, and so we're going to get into that in just a second. Now, look what's going on here. This little flow graph, it looks like blood going through like a vein almost. Like, you see this moving, right? And whenever I go left, see, it's calculating stuff and it's going in. Now, I fell on the spikes and I didn't do anything, but we'll fix that in just a second. Before we do that, before we do our animation, we want to keep this clean and organized. And so what we're going to do is we're going to drag our update out real quick. And this is something they explain partially in the tutorial. So they're going to name this one Calculate Movement. How you do that is you hold Control and you drag it and you let go, right? So this is calculating what the movement is. This is actually setting your velocity. So it's actually moving your object. You can call that whatever you want. Move player, whatever. All right, so this is the way I like to do things. I kind of learned this again from home ec. If you click on this, you get close enough to where it lights up. You can change the color over here, and that's not something they explain. You get a little colored doodad, looks like that. If it's getting information, I like to make it yellow. If it is doing something, it's just the way I do it. I like to make it green. You can change it to whatever you want. You don't have to change anything at all. But the more complicated your player controller get, which by the time this is over with, it is going to be complicated. The color coding, if you want to fix something like by process of elimination, it's just helpful to have that to where you can easily label things. So this is what this function does. This is what this function does over here. And now your player, again, it should move. And we'll go into the animation section of that in the next video.